The notice of this meeting was posted on September 30th and on October 7th. We'll move on to, by the way, for those of you following along in the annual meeting book, the agenda is on page 4. We will move on to, I already called the meeting to order. If you'd please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And we'll move on to agenda item 1.03, introduction of school board members. Diana McFarland, Latoya Holliday, Bryn Horton, Carol Albright, where is Tom Weber, and Alan Foster. So thank you to the school board. We appreciate everything that you do. Moving on to 1.04, recognition of district officials. This will be a test to see if I passed it or not. Yeah, if you could just stand, please. Janet Rossiter is our Assistant Superintendent of Operations. Dr. Brad Sarin, Superintendent. Steph Leonard Whitty, Assistant Superintendent for Teaching, Learning, and Equity. Kathy Walker is Director of Nutritional Services. Eric Nee in the back is Director of Athletics and Activities. Kevin Suko, yep, just say here, Kevin. Yep, Director of Facilities and Grounds. Patty Lux is our Communications Director. Rhonda Page, Business Services Manager. Dr. Chris Sadler, our HR Director. Michelle Kelly, Principal at Horizon. Dr. Nick Greikoff is Director of School Policy and Operations. Mike Morenzik, Principal at Token Springs. Aloy Peen is our Professional Development Manager. Teresa Wisden is the Executive Assistant to Teaching, Learning, and Equity. Dr. Sarah Chiaclardi, Director of Secondary Education. Rick Miller is our Director of Elementary Education. Elizabeth Knudten is our Director of our 4K program. Nicole Teffler is our Principal of C.H. Bird Elementary. Dr. Michael Morgan is our Director of Systemic Equity and Inclusion. Jennifer Apodaca and Janet Thomas are both our Directors of Student Services. So a round of applause for our district officials, please. And Shandu and Georgia, I forgot about you, but thank you for all that you do for our district as well. Moving on to agenda item 1.05, recognition of the people who helped prepare this annual meeting. Shandu, Georgia, Rhonda Page, who puts together the annual booklet. Thank you for that. Phil Fry is sick, but Phil is instrumental, obviously, in this meeting, so we thank him. Lisa Sprindis, who's hiding in the back, thank you for all of your work. Lisa works in business services. So thanks for all the work to make this happen. I also want to thank Betsy and Matt, our two Performing Arts Center directors. Betsy is here at West, and Matt is over at East. Thank you for what you're doing tonight and what you do every day for kids in this school district. Moving on to the recognition of former school board members. Mary Ellen Havilang is here. John Whalen and Karen Dietrich. And I think that's it. So a round of applause for our former school board members. Thank you for your service to Sun Prairie. We will move on to item 1.07, which is our strategic plan update from our superintendent, Dr. Brad Sarin.
Thank you, Dr. Schrader. This is my favorite subject, strategic planning. So bear with me here. All right. Thank you. Okay, so This is an image of the strategic plan that served the Sun Prairie Area School District for about 7 years, from 2013 all the way to 2022. This strategic plan had 4 pillars. It included teaching, learning, and equity, a focus on the workforce, a focus on engaging and communicating with our community, and then a focus on facilities and operations. And this really brought us through all of our long-range facilities plan and updated almost every single part of our curriculum through the curriculum renewal and design plan. And it served the district well, and it was developed in 2013, and lots of courses changed in our world and in the area that we serve inside the attendance boundaries for Sun Prairie, and so we had to update the plan. What we did is we went through a process of engaging our community. So we sent out a survey every Tuesday. We called them 2-Question Tuesdays, and so we got feedback from this survey. We also held relational interviews throughout the district. We interviewed students, and then we had open houses. And so after that, we took all of that information, had the Wisconsin Center for Educational Research actually help us process through it, and we nominated a team of community members. This is an image of our team of community members that went through the process of looking at that information and beginning to formulate an updated, refreshed strategic framework for the school district. If you can advance the slide. What they really did is they took the information from the previous strategic plan along with an instructional framework model that our Teaching, Learning, and Equity Department had been working on, along with the key themes that we had from our community. And what the steering committee did is created a refreshed strategic framework for the school district to work off of for the next 5 years. And if you'd advance the slide. And so this is an image of our updated now strategic framework. A copy of it is in the pamphlet that you received at the door just before the agenda for tonight's meeting. And so one of the interesting features of the updated strategic plan is that our steering committee recommended a sort of a condensed version of it. And so in this case, we've got 3 pillars instead of 4 pillars. The first pillar is a culture of educational excellence. The second pillar is a culture of an engagement and inclusion. And the third pillar is a culture of operational excellence. What they also recommended to the school district is that we take a foundational thread of continuous improvement, revise it, and move it up to the very top of the strategic framework. And they recommended a new phrase to say that the Sun Prairie Area School District has to be committed to equity and excellence through continuous improvement. And so they took our commitment to equity outlined in the board's preamble and put it right in our foundational thread that crosses all 3 of the pillars, and they moved it to the top of the strategic plan to direct how the school district functions for the next 5 years. If you could advance the slide. We also revised through the steering committee our value statements. The value statements before, I think there were like 15 of them. They condensed those value statements into more accessible statements that really outlined the values of the Sun Prairie Area School District, which includes student-centered decision-making, a welcoming climate, a focus on relationships, a focus on high expectations for our students and ourselves, a focus on equity, a focus on diversity, a focus on respect and dignity. And these are our shared values in the system that we try to live up to, and they are grounded in the shared vision that actually comes from our community. Go ahead and advance the slide. Okay, so it's important for everybody to understand that this plan isn't just something that gets 3-hole punched, put in a binder, and then put into a shelf. We actually have very specific plans that are cascaded across every single department and every single school in the Sun Prairie Area School District. So for example, when we, and I have that arrow at the top, when we say our commitment to equity and excellence, what we mean is that we've got, and go ahead and advance the slide, we've got an equity framework. And this equity framework includes components like a community-based vision. It includes the board's governance process and how it focuses on equity. It includes our strategic approach, site excellence and equity, and it also focuses on our partnerships throughout the Sun Prairie Area School District and beyond. And so it's important for people to understand that as a part of our strategic plan, it's not just that image, it's not just that framework, that there are frameworks behind that strategic plan that exist to help us align the system. And so here's another example. When we talk about our commitment to educational excellence, what we're really talking about is the execution of, advance the slide, our instructional framework. And the instructional framework was also grounded in student feedback and grounded in staff and community input and presented to the Board of Education. And that includes 3 primary components: a focus on experiences, a focus on environment, and most important, a focus on equity. And so each one of those 3 components has subcomponents to it that we build expectations and staff development around in order to align the system from 4K to elementary to middle school to high school. So there's consistent expectations across the system with how education looks in each and every classroom. If you'd advance the slide. All right, I present the strategic plan at every single annual meeting because it's important for everybody to understand how entangled our strategic plan is with what we're talking about tonight at the annual meeting, which is a budget. And so when we understand community expectations, and when the board engages in the process of holding the school district accountable for those community expectations, and when the administrative team has to develop the highest confidence strategies that we can develop in order to meet the board's expectations and the community's expectations, we have to fund those strategies. We have to fund those strategies through staffing. We have to fund those strategies through development, equipping our staff in order to execute those strategies. And we have to fund the materials necessary to actually carry those strategies out. And so a budget is just a reflection of the extent to which you intend to try to execute the strategies of your strategic plan. And so what I really want everybody to understand is, like, yes, budgets are sort of like a big deal. And budgets breathe life into the very strategies necessary for us to assist students and meet the community's expectations, which they established with us through this common vision, which is our strategic plan, that strategic framework that I talked about before. And so that's why tonight is so important. Our strategic plan and our budget are very entangled together. If you advance the slide. So moving on from the strategic plan, I'd also like to recognize the fact that across the state of Wisconsin, that it is a very important week for us, and that is to express appreciation for our Board of Education. And that not only includes the Board of Education, our elected officials, as you can see up here, and go ahead and advance the slide, but it also includes the students that have volunteered to be a part of this Board of Education and exert student leadership in order to make sure that that student-based value, student-based decision-making, that is a shared value, that we not only do it across our schools, but also the board models the way and does it as a part of partnering with our student school board members to make decisions. And so please join me in just a round of applause and expressing appreciation to all of our board members. Thank you. And from here, I'm going to turn it over to the school district's attorney to review the procedures under which the meeting will be conducted. Thank you.
So, good evening. My name is Tony Renning. I'm an attorney with the law firm of Renning, Lewis & Lacey. Renning, Lewis & Lacey works with the district on occasion with respect to their legal issues. And before I jump into talking about what my role is tonight and what the qualifications are, just got to say, in my role as a school attorney, I have the opportunity to travel around the state and to look at a lot of school facilities. And driving in here for the first time tonight to see this, this is amazing. You guys have a lot to be proud of, so very amazing facility. With that, annual meetings are kind of unique. They're unique to Wisconsin. The intent of the annual meeting is to allow the electors in the district the opportunity to kind of lift the hood and take a look under and be part of the budget making process and ultimately the adoption of the property tax levy. In addition to that, the intent of the annual meeting is to also allow the electors in the district the opportunity to exercise certain powers that are provided to them by the state statutes. So there are special powers, and we'll address a few of those tonight with respect to some of the resolutions that are set forth this evening. My role tonight is, in essence, as the parliamentarian. In essence, I'm here to make sure that the meeting runs smoothly and efficiently. And to do that, we will adhere to Robert's Rules of Order. Robert's rules are here as rules and procedures to ensure order and to ensure that all of the electors have the opportunity to be heard and to participate in this evening's proceedings. With respect to those individuals who wish to participate this evening, state statutes provide that any United States resident age 18 and above who has resided in the district for at least the last 28 days is entitled to participate and to vote in the issues that come up before the annual meeting this evening. With that, the first order of action on the part of the electors is to nominate and to elect a chairperson for this evening's annual meeting. So with that, I'll open the floor. Does anybody have a nomination for a chairperson?
Mary Ellen Havel Lang, 3013 Bunker View, Sun Prairie. I nominate Dr. Steve Schrader.
Okay, so we have a nomination for Dr. Steve Schrader, and that's one part I left out for those individuals who wish to participate, whether it's to nominate or to second or to make a motion. You need to step forward and utilize the microphones, identify yourself, and so we can record that as part of the minutes or the recording for this evening. So we have a motion for Dr. Schrader. Is there a second?
Del Menard, 3199 Waybridge Drive, Sun Prairie. I'll second that motion.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other nominations for a chairperson for this evening's annual meeting? Second round, any other nominations for a chairperson for this evening's meeting? With that then, all in favor of electing Dr. Schrader as the chairperson for this evening's annual meeting, please designate by saying aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, Dr. Schrader, you've been elected as the chairperson. I will turn it back over to you.
We are going to move on to agenda item 4, which is the 2022-2023 budget summary report. And as I mentioned, Phil Fry is ill, so our Assistant Superintendent of Operations, Janet Rossiter, will provide that report.
Before I start, I just want to add my thank you and appreciation to our board and for Steve to come up here and know everybody's name with all of the positions. It's pretty amazing, and that's the kind of board that we are fortunate to have here in Sun Prairie. So thank you, and congratulations on School Board Week. So Phil told me that if he would have been able to make it, he's got COVID, if this would have been his 25th year delivering this budget presentation. So I am sure, even though I first thought like, okay, you're just trying to get me because he knows that I don't like this kind of stuff, that I thought you're just trying to get me, but I really think he would have wanted to be here for 25 years. So with the budget presentation, if you can advance the slide deck, please, to the next one. The budget process is beginning, it begins well before we set the levy at the end of October. We begin the budget process in about December of every year. And just as an aside of that, some of you may be wondering with the timing of the referendum, why November, why not spring, why not later? It's because of the time that it takes us to prepare a budget. And in addition to that, that budget is going before the board multiple times, and there are many opportunities to comment, and we have a budget hearing as well for comment on that budget. So while tonight is a step in the process, I just want to emphasize that it's one step of many steps that have already occurred. In how districts are funded are through the revenue limit formula. It's a very restricted process in the state of Wisconsin. There's not a lot of opportunity for districts to have local control other than going through a referendum. And the simple revenue limit formula is revenue limit, which is the amount of money that we can spend and the amount of money that we can bring in, minus state aid equals local taxes. And by controlling the amount of revenue that a district can bring in, effectively expenses are controlled. So with that revenue limit, what are the major factors? Student membership, that's the number of students that we have in our community. The state per pupil allocation for the last 2 years, that has been 0. No increase at all from the state to fund our increased costs, plus a yearly increment and the revenue limit base. So with enrollment for this budget, we had projected 29 students, a 29 student decrease. Our preliminary count shows a decrease of 15 students. And that, because we're a declining enrollment school district at this point in time, then it will lead to a negligible impact on what we had planned for the budget. The enrollment is averaged over 3 years, and that's another reason why our estimate being off by about 15 students does not have a major impact on what we had planned for building the budget. So if we look at this chart that shows our enrollment history, and then the line that's going through that is our free and reduced population, you will see it's been somewhat stable over the last years. And in Wisconsin, where a district wants to be is a slow-growing school district. You don't want to be declining, you don't want to be growing very rapidly. Slow, steady growth is how districts fare the best in the revenue limit formula. So we are entering the second year of the state's biennial budget. As I said earlier, we have no increase from the state to meet our increased expenses. There is an increase in equalized aid, and that only goes to lower property taxes. Remember I said earlier, revenue limit minus state aid equals local taxes. So an increase in state aid buys down our local tax burden. The revenue limit increases that we've received lately have not kept pace with inflation. And as you can see, at this point in time, the state does have a surplus that they have been sitting on. This chart shows that this funding is not just a state of Wisconsin, or not state of Wisconsin, it is a state of Wisconsin issue. It's not just a Sun Prairie issue. As you will see in this chart, in 2011, we averaged in Wisconsin to spend $1,166 more than the national average. By 2020, that had sank to $754 below the national average, and that was before 2 years of no increase. So again, this is across the state of Wisconsin. The revenue limit increase each year is the same regardless of the school district. This shows just that decline in funding that has happened in Wisconsin. We have went from 11th to 25th in the nation. The revenue limit minus state aid equals local taxes. So what are those state equalization aid factors? It is the district's per student spending. The state shares in that. The per student property value. The property value is in the numerator, and the membership or the enrollment is in the denominator. The state allocation for equalized aid, as I said, that has increased this year. You'll see in the bottom of the slide, we're projected to get $1,100,000 more in aid. That's where the state has been channeling the new funding, not in funding that the schools can use. It's been in lowering taxes. So as Brett had talked about earlier, this process is all about taking our strategic plan and translating it into yearly budget goals and budget priorities. It takes a while. That's why we start the process in December and we finish it in October. So with that strategic budget basing process, we take care to try to align our resources to the highest confidence strategies for those yearly goals. We present a step-by-step comprehensive calendar to the board, and then we use a lot of comparison data that helps us on our priorities and just helping us understand how we compare with other districts, and you'll see some more of that in the presentation a little bit later. So for this year, there's not a lot of new strategic budget items. We have been focused on employee compensation to bring our compensation in alignment with Dane County average. You'll see that's the largest share of our strategic budget items for this year. On this slide, you'll see how we focus our funding on class sizes. It's a priority in Sun Prairie and has been for quite some time. And you'll see the target guideline ratios for each of our grade levels, and then what our actuals are for this past year. This chart shows the summary of staffing changes, and one of the things that you will see this year is we have more staff as we open this facility. There are some inefficiencies with more buildings. It just happens as a natural process. Our most efficient way of being would be everybody's in one high school, but that's not educationally what's best. Smaller schools are better for the learning environment, but they're more inefficient because you have more costs that will be duplicated across those buildings. This chart shows our largest expenditure areas. You can see we're a people business. And so salaries and fringe benefits are by far the largest expenditure that we have in our district. And then in the lower part, so that's kind of the what, how do we spend the money? And then the lower part is what for. What do we spend that money on? The largest portion, as you would expect, is in instruction. This, was talking earlier that we use data to compare about where we are with other Dane County school districts. This one is our teacher ratios. And as you look at this chart, the left-hand side is highest amount, lowest, more to the right, is lowest, more favorable. So the lower, or the more that we are to the right, the more favorable and the more investment that we have in each of these areas. And you'll notice as we go through these next few slides, watch how those arrows move. So this one is on teachers. If we go to the next slide, this is our support staff. We are richly, have a lot of support for our teaching staff in our buildings. And then the next one is where we are with our administrators. And again, highest ratio is on the left-hand side and lowest is on the right. So looking at our budgeted compensation for this budget year, we're projecting that our total package increase for our professional educators is $2.48 million. Our board was early in saying that they wanted to meet the cost of living expenses, and as I said earlier, we're a people business, so that is where the biggest part of our budget went this year. This shows for our support staff, our administrative support, and our administrative, the different amounts that we will be budgeting for each of those different areas. And again, it's for cost of living, and then each of our groups have some level of professional advancement that is more of what I would call more of a performance-based kind of compensation. It's a minimal amount, but it is recognized. So benefits, as you might guess, are a large portion, and the biggest part of that is health insurance. And you will see that $14.3 million is budgeted for a health insurance increase, dental 1.4, Wisconsin retirement system, that's the system that all Wisconsin public employees are under, 4.8. And employees pay half of that, and the district pays half. So this year, we are balancing the budget, because I told you earlier we had zero increase from the state. We are balancing the budget on the elementary and secondary schools emergency relief funds. That money was allocated to the states to reopen schools to address learning loss. However, in Wisconsin, we've been using it because of the zero increase within the guidelines that are provided, but basically to plug the budget hole from the state. We had one round, ESSER 1, that was $620,000 that has been spent for the past year. Then ESSER 2, $235,000, or $2,235,000, and then $740,000 of that was used to balance or help balance the 22-23 budget. Then ESSER 3 will be planned to be used in the 23-24 year, just as a balancing thing, depending on whether or not what the state does with funding as well. So again, I just want to reiterate, the intent of that was COVID relief, and it's been used in Wisconsin schools for budgeting and making the ends meet. So our overall budget, we are a big business in the Sun Prairie area. $207,900,000 is our budgeted for all of the different funds that we have in the school district. If you look at Fund 10, you'll see that we are proposing this year an unbalanced budget. That is something that is rare that school districts do, because once you spend fund balance, you can't get that back. Our board felt that it was an important thing that with everything that we have gone through to meet the cost of living this year. And so we made the strategic decision to use fund balance, $4 million for this upcoming year. Fund 30 is paying back the debt that we owe for each of the buildings and the debt that we have outstanding for all of our buildings. That amount is $25,600,000. Also included in this budget is the opportunity to defease or pre-fund some debt. That's an important strategy when we have as much debt as we have. The more that we can get ahead and prepay that to save principal and interest for our citizens down the road is something that we want to take advantage of anytime that we can, and manage our tax rate while we're doing that. If the November 8th referendum passes, we will not plan to do any defeasance or prepayment of debt for the upcoming year. Fund 80 is a fund that is outside for programs and services. It's funded entirely locally. The state does not share in any of the costs of that. And it's for programs that are generally outside the school day and for the benefit of the community as a whole. So our biggest programs in there are community schools, and all of you will know that our facilities in Sun Prairie are used a lot by the community. So the total projected levy for the upcoming year is $72,210,000, a 3.7% increase overall, but do notice that the general fund levy is down 2.4%, and we've got the initial part of paying back our debt for our capital referendum. That's why that number is higher this year. That will taper off as we pay off more of our debt. And again, our goal is to prepay as much as we can. Even with that 3.7% increase, we expect that our mill rate or our tax rate to decrease from 1161 to 1136. The reasons for that are twofold. We're getting more money from the state. The state has focused more money into property tax relief. And this is a rapidly growing community. There is, this past year, there was $3 million worth of new construction in the Sun Prairie area. And so when we have a rapidly growing city and that much new construction each year, there are just more people that are sharing in that levy. So this is the mill rate, tax rate. You'll often hear both of those terms used interchangeably. We are projecting a conservative 6% increase in property value for the upcoming year. We'll know that number in about a week. With that 6% property value, that is the 1136 that we showed on the last slide. That's about, again, that 1136 is about a 2.2% decrease in the mill rate. One of the important things to remember is that we have 10 municipalities in our community, and that levy is spread over all of those municipalities. When we talk about mill rates from the Wisconsin Department of Revenue, we use equalized property value, and that is assuming that every community has been reassessed each year so that it's basically not penalizing somebody or rewarding somebody depending on where they are in their reassessment cycle. And they take that from property sales in each of the municipalities to try to gather that information. So where an individual property owner is on that is really the closer that you are to the average from when we say that increase, and mostly in Sun Prairie because that's by far our largest municipality. It'll be pretty accurate, but in some of our smaller municipalities that make up such a small share, it might be off a little bit. This chart shows our mill rate or tax rate history. You can see that it has steadily declined since 1920. And this chart, I talked earlier about us going into fund balance by this year by $4 million. This is where our school district compares to other Dane counties in the district. And again, this chart is set up that the further you are to the left, the more favorable the numbers are. The further you are to the right, the least favorable. We used to be dead last. We're making our way a little bit. And what's really important about fund balance this year was the perfect example of why it's so important to have fund balance. We were able to not have to go through a major budget reduction process. We were able to take a multi-year approach, and by having adequate cash reserves, fund balance, that allows the district to have that flexibility. So the next steps in the budget process are we will receive the amount of equalized aid growth from the Department of Public Instruction on October 15th, and then we will adopt an original budget by October 31st. As the year goes on, we will continue to get updates, grants coming in, updates for other things, and so we take those budget amendments to the board on a quarterly basis to make sure that our budget is keeping pace with the things that are the changes that are just occurring as a natural part of the budget progression through the year. So thank you for your time, and I will turn it back over to Steve.
When I was acknowledging people who helped with putting this meeting together, Patty, I forgot to mention you and Adam. So our two communication people, I want to make sure that recognize you for your help in putting tonight together. We'll move on to agenda item 5. This is the public hearing and review of the 2022-2023 budget by Latoya Holliday, the district treasurer, and Janet Rossiter, our assistant superintendent of operations. Then as Latoya is making her way up, when she gets done, if you have questions, feel free to make your way to the microphone, and then we'll start the budget hearing.
Hi, good afternoon. Janet, the treasurer's report is actually number 6, so do you want me to give the report right now?
Screwed up.
Yeah, sorry, it's okay.
No, you stay up here, though, because you're going to help answer some questions, so I'm sorry. Trying to get us out of here sooner, I guess, than anticipated. So we'll open up the budget hearing now, and ask Brad and Janet to be ready for questions that may come up. So again, any questions that you have, please come up to the microphone, and if you could state your name, address, and your question or comment, please.
Mary Ellen Havel-Lang, 3013 Bunker View in Sun Prairie. I noticed on page 38 on the enrollment patterns that we again have a decrease of 25 students this year. Janet touched a little bit on that and did a nice job on saying where our money's going, but didn't say what was cut. And I'd like to know what was cut, or an idea of what's cut and how that what effect that has on student achievement.
So this year, we did not go through a budget reduction process. That's the reason why we have the deficit in the budget. So we move forward. You saw on the one slide where we talked about our strategic initiatives. Then it was conserving and cutting back. Every one of our administrators just tried to pull back as much as they can, but we did not go through a formal reduction process this year.
So the pattern shows that there will be reductions in the coming years, significant in some years, projected decreases. What is the board or the district planning on doing as far as budget reductions to meet those goals, rather than go to referendum every, 3 years? This one is for 3 years, right? 3 million per year for 3 years.
Yes, that's the roll-in, and then it'll be a consistent 9 million each year thereafter.
Okay, so is the plan to then ask for additional in addition to the 9 million?
Most districts in the state are in a declining enrollment
Right, I'm
situation.
aware.
This year, so the reason that it's problematic this year is the gap between what has come in from the state and what inflation is. The inflation that we had this year is not normal. And so if this inflation rate continues, and if the state continues funding at the way that it has, we will be in budget reduction mode.
Okay, thank you, Janet.
Del Menard, 3199 Waybridge Drive. Janet, have a clarification. On page 16 is published. It says that the overall district budget is $194,500,000. 194 million, yeah, 500,000. And in your presentation, you said 207,900,000. Is that just from when a minor change since when it was published?
Yes, so great question, and our budget continues to evolve. When this went to press, that was the right amount, and we wanted to make sure that the amount was the most recent amount that's on the presentation.
Thank you.
Tracy Frank, 2318 Walnut Hill Lane. I have a question first, just logistically. Besides asking questions, can electors also make a motion for a budget, for an addendum to the budget? Or we can only ask questions?
Sorry. As I said at the outset, this is kind of a unique thing in Wisconsin to allow the electors the opportunity to look under the hood and take a look, participate in the budget process, and then ultimately the levy process. But the opportunity isn't to make amendments or to change the budget at all. Ultimately, that's the board's decision. The opportunity tonight is to seek clarification or to ask questions with respect to how the proposed budget and ultimately the levy was developed.
Okay, so questions or comments? Okay.
Correct.
All right, so considering that, I'm gonna kind of piggyback off of what Mary Ellen was talking about is where are we cutting? And basically we're not. And so my concern as well is that we don't have a budget reduction plan. And one of the categories that is in this report to our community talks about the feedback from staff and families. And our staff says that 52% of employees say, all things considered, this is a good place to work. I consider that a pretty low percentage, 52%. And then parents and caregivers, the satisfaction is at 70%. It looks like our district goals are closer to 80% for those. And the comment that I want to make is that is around our the number, and if you saw in that one graph, we were pretty far over in terms of administrative, positions and roles and costs. And so we're administrative heavy comparatively.
No, it's the opposite.
Yeah, it's low.
It's the opposite.
Okay.
So we're administratively light.
We're administratively light compared to
Yes.
other districts?
Yes, so the
Okay.
numbers that were, the more to the right it was, the more favorable the ratios are.
Okay, all right. So I'll just share a little bit about our own data. So over the last 10 years, so comparatively, it may not be, we may be administrative light, but I'll say that as a district, we've grown in administrative costs significantly over the last 10 years. So 10 years ago, we had 11 positions that were listed as full-time positions at district office, and last year we had 49. That's an increase of 16% of positions. The cost was around $1 million 10 years ago. Last year was $4.6 million, which is another 16% increase in cost of our district office. So that has gone up significantly at a time when our student population only went up 1.6%. So I guess to me, even if we are, comparatively where we are with other districts, that when we increase district office, there should be an increase in teachers saying positive things about the district, right? Because they should feel like they have more support. So if there's more people supporting them at the district support center, then our employee survey question about this is a good place to work should increase, theoretically. But that has not happened. That's gone down at the same time as we've added positions at a pretty alarming rate for our district compared to where we were 10 years ago. What I can't make a motion about, but I would love to ask if there's ever been a consideration of freezing as part of a budget reduction plan, if we've considered or would consider freezing any creation of new positions at the district office. And I know building administrative, each building as well has increased in their administrative costs. The reason why I think this is a good idea to consider freezing the creation of new positions within our district office, within our building administration, is that I think it would save us money. It would help us if the board and the district could come together and say, yes, we're going to freeze this hiring. I think it could help with the referendum passing because it would show some efforts towards a reduction plan. And it wouldn't necessarily be a budget line item anyway. It's something that the district could make a statement on. It also gives us a plan, obviously, if there's a no vote with the referendum, that we have something in place already to freeze some hiring in an area that's been increasing exponentially over the last 10 years. So I guess just an overall comment, a question, if that's been considered, if that could be considered through the district and the board going forward.
So to answer your question with regard to the surveys, if you look back over time, the surveys are at a different place than they were, and we have attributed a lot of that to COVID. COVID was really rough on teaching staff and everybody that works in a school system across the board. Without a doubt, every one of our staff members would say that last year was the toughest year of their career, and I don't care which position it is. So we struggle with getting adequate subs. If anybody knows subs, we'd love to have them coming into and helping it up because teachers are having to help and cover classes when at other times there would be a sub there. That's hard on a person. And then in addition to that, so we're really struggling with subs. Public education has been vilified. Not a lot of people are going into the profession. We're struggling to get teachers. We're struggling across the board in all positions. And we saw that this last year in our surveys. I believe that our surveys, if other districts took those same surveys, we would fare no worse than other districts. It's just been a tough time in education. Then with regard to the district administration, we had been growing at a very good clip. And as our district grows, We have transitioned from a school district of many small schools that really don't have systems binding them together to needing to put together, as we have more elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, we need to have systems in place to bind those things together. It's basically the foundation so that all of the other things can happen. And so you've seen some of that in the most recent years with positions that are trying to basically put the systems in place to make all of the strategic plan happen. That we're probably at a point now from a growth perspective that we're starting to level off. So I'm not sure that is going to continue. Some of those positions that have been added have been at the community's request for specific positions to address certain situations in our communities. So we tried to be responsive to that, and part of it is growing.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I think, looking toward the future with the referendum, it would give us confidence in the community if there was sort of like some ownership in it, right? Like, here's what we're doing, here's our part in order to help the costs be, sustained. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Let me just make a comment from the one board member's perspective. I'm not pretending to speak for all the board. We're not going to be able to cut $7 million of our budget by cutting administrators. That's the reality. And so the notion that we've just been, and I'm not saying you said this, Tracy, but for those of you listening, that we're just adding administrators left and right is just not accurate. We did add administrators, an associate principal at all of our elementary schools, which I think was a good call. What you saw for this year is because we opened this building, and we needed to hire administrators for this building. But if you look at all of our employee classifications, the administrator group is the worst ratio in Dane County of all of them. So our support staff, we're doing well, comparatively speaking, in Dane County. Our teachers were doing well. Our administrators at the other end of that spectrum. And so I just want to be clear about the notion that we're hiring. We hired a director of equity because that's what we heard the community was wanting. We hired an additional director of student services because after our bullying and behavior task force, the community was saying that they wanted more social and emotional learning. They wanted more mental health services to our students. We hired a director of school operations and policy before COVID, and thank goodness we did, because Dr. Rykoff is the one who really navigated us through COVID. And so beyond that, I'm not sure when the last administrator was hired. But the reality is we can't cut balance our budget on the backs of administrators. And I'm not in favor of pitting administrators against teachers or other staff in the school district. I just don't think that that's productive, and I don't think that that helps create a culture of collaboration. Any other questions or comments?
I want to start off by clarifying.
Name and address.
Lisa
please.
Goldsberry, 708 Francis Court, Apartment 4, Sun Prairie, Wisconsin. I want to start off by clarifying. I didn't hear a request to cut any positions, but to freeze on hiring new positions. So I just want to clarify that. And then I also want to ask about, on one of the slides when we broke down the different positions and you had, or salaries or budgets for those on the administrative one, did that include bonuses? Because I did do a open records request for contracts and found that many of our administrators get retention bonuses, which was interesting because when we talked about bonuses for other staff, we talked about performance bonuses. Yet our administrators get huge retention bonuses. So I just wanted to know, did that line item that we saw in terms of cost for administrators, did that include bonuses?
The costs that are in the budgeting are all encompassing. They include everything that is a part of a contract.
Any other questions or comments?
Heather Dubois, Bernard, 681 Broadway Drive. I have an unrelated comment, but following the past two speakers and what you said, Dr. Schrader, I think a commitment to maintaining administrative salary increases at a no greater rate than an increase to educator staff would be a wonderful way of ensuring that there's not a distinction or us versus them created between administrators and educators. So that would be a budget priority I'd love to see. My question.
Can I respond to that?
Oh, sure.
We do have an employee, a professional educator group that is meeting on a monthly basis, and we are looking at our compensation plan for that particular group, and I can promise you that what you're talking about is being discussed.
Glad to hear it.
Yeah.
My question has to do with just a comparison that I'm making between the graph on page 39, which illustrates shifts in economically disadvantaged students in the district. I think I know that the reason it looks like we have fewer students who are economically disadvantaged during COVID was because during that time, all students were eligible for free lunch under the federal program, and so fewer families filled out the form. And so we didn't get an accurate count during those years. And so I'm comparing that to the food service budget item on page 26, which indicates that we are paying significantly more for school lunch this year than in the past. And I guess I'm just wondering, Janet, if you might speak to whether or not you think this year's percentage of economically disadvantaged students is accurate, and whether or not you think that that's going to have an impact on, total costs of school lunch or any other items in the district budget that we might need to be looking out for.
I do believe that the number will be more accurate this year because the program has ended. So the COVID relief that provided free lunch for all individuals regardless of ability to pay is no longer there, so that if families need to take advantage of that, they must fill out the form. So yes, I believe that the numbers will increase. As far as for the school nutrition budget increasing, one of the things that our director, Kathy Walker, is doing is making a concerted effort on equipment replacement this year. So there's significant money in there to bring old systems up as far as for just getting them replaced, equipment replaced and that. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. I guess I just am worried that we might not have an accurate count of how needy some students in the district might be, and that we might not be able to anticipate their needs, and I want to make sure that we can budget for them.
We work really hard, and maybe Kathy, you could talk about some of the different methods that we use to make sure that people are aware. There has been some certification efforts that more is coming directly from the county, so people don't have to fill out forms. And then as a district, we do outreach and try to make sure that people are aware of the opportunities that they have. And is there anything more that you'd like to add to that, Kathy?
Yeah, good question there. Thanks, Kathy.
Why don't you come to the mic?
So I would say that we are getting a lot more students that are automatically becoming eligible for free or reduced meals because of direct certification from the state. More people are qualifying for benefits such as food stamps. We are doing a lot more outreach in that we really focused this year on sending a mailing out to all families, not only in English, but if they spoke a different language. Based on that, we have received so many more free and reduced applications that have come to us this year that actually our percentage is up, I think it's up over 30% already. So we do Stuff the Bus where we hand out forms. We have a translator in the district to help families come in and fill the forms out appropriately. So I think we also do a Blackboard Connect. It's available online, electronically. We're making a lot of efforts to make sure that we're reaching out to families. We will actually be sending out another message to families that have not filled out, and they will become paid soon. So we're trying to get that message out as much as possible.
I think you would agree, and correct me if I'm wrong, that we're able to better target and reach people than we have in the past because our methods of outreach have expanded and become more diversified.
Yes, I agree with that because in the past, well, actually even now, excuse me, even now, the direct certification, it's really only required 3 times a year. We usually do it every week or 2. So by doing that, when someone becomes eligible for food stamps or other benefits from the state, and we do that certification right away, we capture those kids and we get a letter out to the families letting them know that they now qualify for either reduced or free meals.
Thanks for that, Kathy. And if I could, since I still have the mic, I do have one final comment on the budget, which is that it makes me extremely angry as a parent in the district and as someone who supports strong and excellent schools, that the state has put us in a situation where we're forced to use COVID relief that was intended to meet the actual needs of children who struggled through the pandemic to fill holes in our general budget, and that we have to go to referenda for that reason. I think that is an absolutely unconscionable way for the state to do state finance, and I am frustrated with having to look at a budget that should be allocating new dollars in new and creative ways to meeting the needs of kids who are still trying to catch up or who have mental health concerns or other issues that we haven't quite matched yet through our post-pandemic teaching and learning. And I hope that everyone who's paying attention to these things will join us in advocating for better next time around in terms of delivering a state budget that actually meets the needs of our kids and that we won't be in this situation again. Thank you.
Heather, I just want to make one last comment about our nutrition program, and I know you know this, but for everybody in the audience and those watching at home, the position of the Sun Prairie Area School District is every child should receive a free breakfast and a free lunch regardless. And whether that's funded at the state level or the federal level, less concerned about that, but somebody needs to fund feeding our kids. And the notion that we're not there in 2022 is, we believe, wrong, and we're trying to do what we can as a school district to advocate certainly at the state level to try to get some funds put into that. Yeah. So, any other questions or comments? Okay. Asking one last time, questions or comments? Okay. See none, we will close this portion of the meeting, of the budget hearing and review, and now turn it over to Treasurer LaToya Holliday for her report.
Good evening again, everyone. Just briefly, the treasurer's report for tonight. The Sun Prairie Area School District had its audit field work, which began in August of this year, and the preliminary audit report was completed. The audit is completed by Johnson & Block CPAs, whom we've engaged for this work, and the audit will be presented to the school board for review and approval in December, and this concludes the treasurer's report. Thank you.
Thank you, LaToya. We will now move on to agenda item 7. This is new business. And just want to point out on page 13, there are sample motions. Now, again, the numbers in there, we're not putting those in to lead anyone to say anything. They're simply sample motions to make this meeting as efficient as can be. So with that, we'll move on to 7.01. This is to set the annual salaries of school board members for the 2022-2023 school year.
Del Menard, 3199 Waybridge Drive. Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion, and then after said motion, I'd like to make a comment before you move further down the agenda.
Sure.
Okay. I move that the salaries of the school board officials and members for the 2022-2023 school year be established as follows. School board president, $6,000. Other members, $5,000.
We have a motion, and Del, just stay right there. Let's get a second, and then we'll have discussion, okay? Is there a second on this motion? Could you come up and, thanks, Father Mike. Thanks.
Father Mike Test, 318 East MacArthur, Sun Prairie. I second the motion.
Thanks, Father Mike. Okay, Del, go ahead with your comment, please.
Yes, for a comment. When you get down to 7.05, I'm looking at Janet and I'm looking at you. Regarding the sample motion for the tax levy, would somebody check that and make sure that what's written is what you are asking for tonight? Because it is slightly different, and I just want to make sure that when that motion gets made, that the correct dollars are used.
Great, thank you, Del.
You're welcome.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the floor. Any questions or comments on that motion? Okay. Asking a second time. Questions or comments, and a third time. Okay. Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. That motion carries. We'll now move on to 7.02. This is the reimbursement of school board members' expenses.
You got it right, Chandu. Mary Ellen Haviland. I move to authorize the payment of actual and necessary expenses of a school board member when traveling in the performance of duties.
Okay, we have a motion, and is there a second?
Come on. Del Menard again. I'll second that motion.
Thanks, Mel and Del. Any questions or comments on this motion? Okay. Asking a second time? And a third. Okay. All those in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. That motion carries. 7.03 is to set the date and time for the 2023-2024 annual meeting, or to authorize the school board to set the date and the time.
Tom Weber, 2243 Innsbrook Drive. I move that the date and time for the 23-24 annual meeting be set at a future date and time.
By the school board?
By the school board.
Thank you. Is there a second on that? All eyes are on you, Del.
There's more than just a couple of us here. I'll second that motion. Del Menard.
Thank you. So we have a motion and a second. Any questions or comments on that motion? Asking a second time. And a third. See none. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. That motion carries. Okay. Moving on to 7.04, other business as permitted at an annual meeting. Asking one more time if there's any other business as permitted at an annual meeting. Okay. We will move on to 7.05. This is to set the property tax levy for the 2022-2023 school year.
Am I going to be on? Janet, you want me to use this number that's in the book? Okay. All right. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Del Menard, Sun Prairie, I move to approve a tax levy in the amount of $72,210,726 upon all taxable property in the Sun Prairie Area School District for the purpose of operating and maintaining the district schools, community service programs, and for paying for debt for school projects.
Okay. We have a motion, and is there a second?
Tom Weber again, I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any questions or comments on that motion? Okay. Asking a second time, questions or comments? And a third time. Okay, see none. All those in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no? That motion carries. Before we adjourn, I just want to thank all of you for being here. We really appreciate your time. We know there's a lot you could be doing on a Monday night, and we value the time that you spent with us tonight. So with that, is there a motion to adjourn? Go ahead, Del. You deserve it.
This is going to be some sort of a record. Del Menard, I make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Okay. We have a motion. We don't need a second on that. All those in favor of adjournment, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Thank you again.